John, really appreciate you joining us on this episode, and looking forward to not only talking to you here, but seeing you the next 2 days, because we are here in Tampa, and you're here for the quarterly meeting that's taking place in the Tampa Bay region this quarter, and then you're going into the governor's meeting immediately afterwards, which I won't be seeing you on that part, but can you just give us the real quick rundown as to who Film Florida is?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me on. Film Florida is a not-for-profit trade association that represents all aspects of the screen production industry. And we've gotten away from saying film, television, digital media, because if it's entertainment on screen, it pretty much falls under our umbrella. So we've been around for 26 years. It's a membership-based organization. We have members from Pensacola to Key West, so literally tip to tip. All aspects, crew, cast, film commissions, labor organizations, schools, students, hospitality, a bunch of film commission or a bunch of film festivals. So pretty much anybody that works in the industry is represented within the organization. And overall, the goal is to just grow and strengthen the industry in any way we possibly can.
Yep. And Two Stories is a member, and we've been very proud to be a member for years. We actually, the different tiers and memberships, right? Mm-hmm. We actually upped ours a few years ago and went up a tier, realizing that we can aid monetarily while also getting our name out there a little bit more.
Yep.
That's the only reason Film Florida exists, is because of the membership fees.
We are 100% funded by our members.
Yes.
So our ability to do literally anything exists. My ability to have a job as the executive director is completely dependent upon whether or not our members see fit to join and renew each year, because that's where all of our funding comes from. And we have a number of different membership tiers, and obviously we hope people go a little bit higher because it helps us financially, but we do our best to try and give back to those members and give them a good return on investment based on logo placement on different things and highlighting things on social media and those type of things. So we appreciate you guys sticking with us through the years.
Going to continue to do so. All right, so I actually wanted to start with I've always wanted to ask you this. Mm-hmm. Being the executive director, you've seen a lot, you've done a lot within Film Florida. What is just one awesome story? Just going to give you the floor to tell us a fun project, a cool travel moment, a cool place, a cool person you met. Just what's that one story that you're just like, all right, 4 years ago this happened and it was just really cool.
So I really don't know that I could boil it down to one, but I mean the things that I really take pride on are when I'll be out and about talking to somebody and I've never met them before. They probably didn't even know who Film Florida was. And then they start kind of regurgitating some of our talking points and some of the important things of why our industry, is important to the state of Florida. And it makes me think, okay, it's working. Like, our message is out there. Whether the people know that it came from us is not necessarily relevant, but the fact that people understand who we are and know who we are is reassuring. The other part that I think is really cool in my role, I see my job kind of as connecting dots. And so when somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm looking for this, and do you have any suggestions? I don't know where to go. And I'm able to go through our membership directory and say, you know what, there's 4 of those that are members. Here are their names. Here are their phone numbers. Go ahead and give them a call or reach out if you need it. And then to hear that they did connect and it did work out, that's really cool. Our organization has grants and scholarships for students and young filmmakers. And, we get inundated with submissions, and some of them are really good. Some of them are really not good. But you kind of get in this lull of, well, it's just more submissions. We'll evaluate them. We have a committee, and then some get money, some don't, all that. But then to find out 6 months, a year, 2 years later that one of our films that we gave money to is premiering at the Florida Film Festival or the Fort Lauderdale Film Festival or Miami Film Festival. And then you hear people send you pictures of, there's the Film Florida logo in the credits for partially funding. It's like, okay, this is working. This is worth kind of the pain that we all go through sometimes. And so, there are success stories. And I think just like anybody else, it's easy to kind of fall into a rut. But when you kind of sit back and think, where we started from as an organization, which was long before me, where I started with the organization more than 8 years ago to where we are now, membership is more than doubled in that short period of time. And we're doing a lot more. And so when you actually sit back and kind of start checking off what it is we have accomplished, it's kind of cool. And I mean, selfishly, like, the podcast for us, we're in our 7th season now, more than 130 episodes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And knowing that in 2018, it was just kind of do we kind of want to give this a try? And because in my previous job, I wanted to do a podcast. I thought it was a good idea, but I couldn't wrap my arms around what the hook was for our company at the time. So when I left that company and got to Film Florida and a couple of years into it, I thought, I still think it's a good idea. I still think it's a good way to get the messaging out there, to meet people in terms of the guests and tell those stories. And so I'm ecstatic that 7 years later we're still doing it, and listenership is up, and people send emails about listening to this episode or that episode. And I was just recently back in my the homeland up in Illinois, and a couple of my friends up there actually said, I heard your episode with Melora Hardin, who was on Monk and The Office. And I was like, yeah, she was pretty cool. And so they were like, oh yeah, that was one of my favorite shows. So I mean, to hear people actually really listening to the podcast is kind of cool.
How do you see your podcast shaping the film industry here in Florida?
Well, that's a good question. Originally, when we started the podcast, we wanted it to be very Florida-centric. Mm-hmm. And so we did a lot of those interviews. They really absolutely had to have a Florida story, a Florida hook. Most of them still do, but the challenge of a podcast is, like, people will say, oh, it's so easy, you just record it and you put it up there and anybody can hear it. And it's like, okay, which is true, but
who's actually going to hear it?
Who's actually going to hear it? And everybody is doing that. So there's a lot of noise out there. And so we have to kind of walk that fine line between, because one of the challenges that I have and one of the things that I feel badly about is some of the best stories and some of the best interviews are some of the least listened to episodes, because they may not have name recognition or they may not have credits that people recognize. And the way it is people, they subscribe, or even if they look at it, they'll look at the description and say, I don't know any of this, next. And so you do need to have a bit of a hook. And so we really do want to tell Florida stories and things that have Florida ties to them. But ultimately, the goal is to have episodes that people listen to. And so there usually has to be some sort of name recognition or credit recognition. But most of the times, there is some type of Florida hook. I mean, that's the one thing I have learned, is that even when you get connected, because this person will say, hey, I have a connection to this person who has a connection to this person who has a connection to this person. And it's like, ooh, that's kind of a somewhat famous name. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, well, what are we going to talk about? There's no Florida. You start going through IMDb credits, and it's like, oh, yeah, they did actually do something in Florida. Oh, they have a cousin that lives in Florida, or they used to spend time on vacation in Florida. So there's a Florida story, Florida hook to just about everything.
And even when you go outside of the Florida stories, I would see that as a big challenge to keep it interesting and try to hook it back. But even when you go outside of the Florida stories, do you notice that the listenership from Florida cinematographers or filmmakers, digital media creators, are those listeners going up regardless?
Over the last 2 years, yes. Our Florida listens and downloads are relatively consistent. And I think that was part of the thing when we got to we're in season 7 now, I would say about season 4, about 4, where I decided like, okay, yes, Florida obviously is our priority, but there is kind of that ceiling of, we've gotten our listens. We've gotten our listeners in Florida. They're here. I don't know how much we're really going to grow. Let's see if we can kind of expand this. And ultimately, we use it as a marketing tool for the organization, and we use it as a marketing tool for the entire state of Florida. So I actually want people in North Carolina or Louisiana or Texas or Oklahoma to hear it and think, oh yeah, Florida, like they got cool stuff going on down there. Let's check it out,
Yeah.
So,
I mean, as the executive director of Film Florida, I would imagine one of your primary goals is to get films to come down to Florida. So if you are reaching outside of here, you're doing your job. Right?
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, our priority is to our members to help them. And one of the ways that we help our members is to make sure there are enough projects and jobs and opportunities and money. And yes, obviously we would like this Florida company to hire these Florida workers who happen to be Film Florida members. That's all. I mean, that goes without saying. But a lot of times it's companies coming in from out of town, whether it be commercials or corporate or even convention videos or music videos or anything like that. When they come here, we want to make sure that they're confident in the crews and the cast that they can get here in Florida. And one of the ways to do that is just constantly marketing the expertise, the history, the experience that we do have here in the state.
Amazing. Yeah, I was going to ask you in your words, what are the unique advantages that Florida has to bring in these filmmakers and projects, or to, even if you could speak on the actual crews that are here, their unique advantages that can add to people coming into town?
Yeah, well, I mean, the most important thing that Florida will always have going for it is its locations and weather. It is, to a certain extent, difficult to match some of the Florida locations. Obviously, technology allows you to do some things, but generally speaking, it's hard to replicate a lot of Florida locations. So that will always be our biggest kind of selling point attribute for projects. The crews that are in Florida, institutional knowledge is one of the biggest things. So, we're not to date this, but we're recording this, and it's really hot out. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're bringing your casting crew from the northern half of the state down to Florida anytime between May and October, it's hard for them to truly understand what they're getting themselves into weather-wise. Of course, all the states up north, they have hot weather and all that, but it's not Florida hot. I mean, when I go up north, and I actually think it's funny that the few hot days that people have up north, and oh my God, it's so hot, it's so hot. And we actually refer to it, well, it's not Florida hot, because there's that combination of the heat and the humidity over the summer that our crews just know how to deal with. They expect it, they've done it forever. And so, we've literally been in this industry as a state for more than a century. And obviously people that from the very beginning are no longer with us, but people that are in our crews have been doing this here in Florida for a long time. And so they know the ins and outs of the humidity and the heat and the afternoon thunderstorms and how to deal with all of those things that most people, when they come from out of town, they're just like, oh my God, what, whereas our crews are just like, yeah, this is a Tuesday, this is how it is.
Yeah.
I legitimately think that if you work in production here in Florida, you are a semi-professional weatherman.
Yep.
Like we look at the app, we kind of scroll a little bit, we look at all the data. We'll be okay tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or on the inverse, we need to bump our crew call a little bit. We're gonna get rained out in the afternoon, and sometimes clients are like, "Really?" And we're like, telling you right now, like
Well, I mean,
we need to
there's-
believe this.
It's always interesting when people come down from up north and they'll see like the 14-day forecast and say, oh my God, it's going to rain every day. And it's like, well, yes, maybe, but like it's not a washout. You just got to time it. You have to figure that out. And that's part of what you get when you hire a Florida crew is that knowledge of how to deal with the weather. Whether it be, wintertime weather has its challenges too, but, our summers are interesting. But the best thing about our crews is just that institutional knowledge of what it's like to be filming in Florida.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. I was looking through your LinkedIn, and I saw that you love social media, and you love leveraging it.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes and no. Yeah.
deep breaths.
Okay.
How do you use social media right now? Like, what's your strategy to leverage social media for Florida's benefit?
Well, social media has its pros and cons. There's no doubt about it. And there are plenty of times when I get very frustrated with the algorithms. I mean, I don't want to sound like the old guy sitting on my porch, but I miss the days of early social media where if you put something out, your followers were actually going to see it, and
They say it's less than 10% of your followers.
yeah,
that actually
it's
see your
tough. I
content.
mean, and look, I hate the fact that you have to pay. Well, it's pay to play. I mean, basically, if you want more than your usual 5-10% to actually see, you definitely have to pay. However, promoting posts on Facebook and Instagram are still far, far cheaper than the traditional ways of marketing.
Yep.
And so, again, we use social media right now. It's important to make sure that, we use the term global Hollywood. When we say Hollywood, we don't mean Hollywood, California. We mean global people that work in our industry. The one way to do it is to make sure that you're putting stories in their feeds. And so we do, I would say 75-80% of our paid social media marketing is outside the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Because it's brand recognition in terms of the state. For a variety of reasons, there are questions about whether or not Florida is interested in the screen production industry right now. Mm-hmm. And so we obviously believe, yes, we are, because we're trying. But it's important to make sure that people all over the country that work in our industry see Florida, understand Florida, know Florida, want to come to Florida. And so we do a lot of our marketing pushing out into those feeds because, you only have so much money, and we don't necessarily need to market the state of Florida to those of us living here.
Right.
We kind of know it. And so we're making sure, because we do believe wholeheartedly out of sight, out of mind. And if people are in our industry are thumbing through their feeds and don't see anything about stuff going on in Florida, that they're going to forget about it. And
Yeah.
so we're trying to forcefully put it in front of them and make sure that they remember that we're still here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, you're doing it right, because I see the stuff all the time on the feed, and it reminds me how active you guys are and what else is happening. Like you will post something from Miami-Dade County or Orange County or the Key West or just whatever different zone within the state, and we are so immersed in the Tampa Bay region. This is where we're located, right? So that would make sense. With us being in our bubble, we need to be reminded even like, oh, that movie or, that actor or actress just did something in Pensacola. That's cool. Hadn't heard about that. Or on the inverse, you go, oh my God, I did hear about that 6 months ago.
Yep.
I now see that the project's completed. It's going through a film festival run or a distributor, or it got sold, or now it's going to make it to XYZ platform. There's actually been projects that I have ended up watching because you posted that, oh, this made it to Hulu and debuted last week.
Yep.
And I go, oh,
Yeah.
that's right. I did hear about that 8 months ago.
Yeah. I always tell people that part of my job from a marketing perspective for the organization is to tell our industry story. And nobody wants to hear me preaching analytics and whatever as a story. That's not the story. The story is our members. Our members are the industry. And the more we're talking about, whether it's film festivals, whether it's about events, whether it's about independent films, whether it's about a project that people are working on, that's the industry. Those are the stories that resonate. And so it's a good portion of my job is collating information and making sure I have what's going on in the different regions, because you're right, Florida is a huge state. And a lot of times people do live in their silos. It's natural. Yep. And so we need to remind the people in Miami-Dade County what's going on in Pinellas County. And then we need to remind the Pinellas County people what's going on in Duval County, and remind the Duval County people what's going on in Orange County. I mean, like, that's part of the community that we try and build within the organization. Otherwise, you can just hang out with the people in your area and learn what's going on in your area, and that's fine too, but that's not giving people a true sense of what is going on in the state of Florida.
Yeah. I know a lot of what we're talking about is bringing people into Florida, but what are your thoughts? This might be an ignorant question. I really don't know. What are your thoughts about connecting local businesses with filmmakers or videographers? The small business,
It's huge. It's huge, hugely important, because, one of our colleagues is famous for saying you must be present to win, and it has a lot of different meanings. And yeah, I am constantly trying to connect local businesses with local production companies, whether the businesses probably aren't members of our organization because they don't work in our industry. But a lot of times when they're trying to figure out, I need to hire people to make something for me. I need some production. I need whatever. They don't even know what it is they need. They just they know they need something. A lot of times they will call us and say, like, this is what I'm looking for. Do you make any recommendations? And I make no bones about it. When people call me, the first thing I do is go to our membership list. I mean, that's one of the big differences between us and a local film commission, whereas a local film commission is, in most cases, taxpayer dollars funding them. And so they can't play favorites. It's illegal. And so when somebody calls them up and says, Mr. and Mrs. Film Commissioner, I need a company to do some work, who do you recommend? Well, they say, well, you should go look at our production database, and that has a list of all of the companies that work in our industry. Okay, fine. That's kind of overwhelming to a company. Yep. They call me. I'm not bound by any of that because we're funded entirely by our members. And what better way to make sure that our members are taken care of than trying to find them jobs? Mm-hmm. And so when somebody calls up and says, hey, I'm in, Pinellas County and I'm looking for a whatever, first thing I do is start looking at our membership database, and I'll say, give me your email address. By the end of the day, I'll send you a list of some companies you should reach out to. And I start at the top of our list, which frankly is the people that pay the most money in their membership, and I go to the bottom of the list. So when I send it out, if there's 10 companies, the top couple are going to be all of our corporate members in varying levels, and then you get to some of the individuals that do the work. And so I absolutely feel an obligation to try and connect companies to our members that do the work, because again, like, I'm not stupid. If we don't get enough members, I don't have a job.
Yeah.
And if our members don't have enough work, the first thing they're going to dump out of is a membership to a trade association. Like, they're certainly not going to dump out of buying a new camera that can do them work or hiring a new employee for something. That's what they got to do, their business. It's the membership stuff that does go by the wayside sometimes. And so it's in my best interest to make sure that we're trying to funnel as much as we can through those companies.
Kevin and I were talking about something recently, and this is a pretty big question. I'm not sure what your answer is going to be on volume walls. You touched on it for a moment of production companies outside of Florida attempting to recreate Florida.
Yeah.
There's some big movies, I'm sure Kevin could list a handful of them, that have recreated Florida or fake cities of Florida. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you feel that that affects the production companies here?
I mean, it drives me crazy when first, it drives me crazy anytime we lose business as a state, because I know, and I can recite the stats just in major feature film and television series over the last 5+ years. We've lost more than 100 major feature film and television series that would have spent more than $2 billion here in the state and used over 300,000 hotel room nights. So when you're talking about, and now look, the pushback, the devil's advocate side will say, yeah, but the state budget is over $100 billion. So like $2 billion is only 2% of that entire a year's budget. But the reality of it is, think about how important it would be for any company. I mean, specifically 2 stories. Yep. How important would another $100,000 of business be? I mean, it's huge to a lot of businesses. Mm-hmm. So it drives me crazy every time we lose business. What drives me even more crazy is when we lose business to other states that try and fake Florida. It's not authentic. It's not real. And yes, of course, probably 90% of the audience that sees it doesn't know the difference and doesn't care that it is in Florida. But there's a lot to be said for being authentic. And I think when you watch a film or television series, really critical that set in Florida or has a Florida story and isn't done in Florida, it just doesn't look, sound, feel the same. And so, look, of everything that we do, if we could just get Florida stories to film in Florida, we would be in a much better position. So yeah, it drives me crazy.
I couldn't agree more on that. I mean, just if it's Florida, film in Florida. Yeah. Like, crazy concept, right?
What's done to, it's a strong word, but what's done to combat that?
Nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. I mean, ultimately, a lot of that comes down to the state incentives issues, where I'm sure most projects that are set in Florida would absolutely love to film in Florida. But if they're gonna get, 20% rebate or tax credit in North Carolina or Georgia or Louisiana or Texas, from a business standpoint, it's hard to argue with them. Like, I mean, from our perspective, we say, look, if you bring that budget to us, we're smarter. We know what we're doing here. We're going to be able to save you probably about that 20%. But most times it doesn't even get to that point. Most projects aren't even allowed to reach out to the local film commissions or the Department of Commerce or even us about bringing a project to Florida because they've been mandated from their financial people to only look where there are incentives. And since we don't have a state incentive, we only have the local incentives, a lot of them don't even get the opportunity. So it really is just comes down to money most of the time, which, that's why there's a local incentive here in Pinellas County. There's one in Hillsborough County, one in Jacksonville, Miami-Dade, and Broward right now. Palm Beach has their own separate type of program as well. So there are definitely some local incentives that are trying to help combat that. But if you're doing a $40-50 million project, it's just a financial situation where they'll go to a state with a bigger incentive.
Yeah, a statewide.
Yeah. If like Film Florida or our local representatives weren't here, what do you think the long-term effect would be of not having these incentives, and where would we end up?
Well, I mean, we know in the last decade, since we haven't had a statewide incentive, that production is down. There's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. Production is down. Infrastructure is down.
And when you say production, is it film, like screen, or is it even local businesses, like we said?
because there is the trickle down. That's
Gotcha.
the thing, is that a statewide incentive program is far more of a marketing tool than it is a financial tool. Because let's just take the old incentive program in Florida. The last big one they had was 2010 to 2016. It ran out of funding in 2014, but just for statute, it was on the books from 2010 to 2016. 300 projects got that incentive, participated in that incentive. There are literally hundreds of projects going on every day here in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
So a very, very, very small amount of projects actually benefit from a financial incentive. But it is the marketing side of it where, because you have that incentive, the industry in general knows that the state is production friendly, open for business, whatever term you want to use. And so even if they may not qualify, they'll see this movie or this television series and say, that looks like a cool place, let's go there. Well, when there are less of those, there are less of the other projects that see it and want to come here, so they don't. There's the perception that because we don't have a statewide incentive program, that the state isn't interested in the industry. So if you're coming from another state, why would you go to a state that's not interested in our industry when you can go somewhere else?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things. And then from the working standpoint, again, only 300 jobs or only 300 projects got that old incentive program. But every one of those projects average somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people working on them each day, which means the other jobs that are happening need to be filled with other people that work in the industry. There are a lot of people that work in the state of Florida that have no interest in working in film and television. They just want to do corporate videos. They just want to do convention videos. They want to do music videos. Sports stuff. They want to do those type of things. But if the people that traditionally work in film and television are not working in film and television, well, they got to find other jobs. And so they may be more experienced than that other crew base.
Yes.
So then those people are taking jobs from other people, and the other people don't have the ability to gain experience, to get better, to hone their craft. And so they may end up working a side job that has nothing to do with our industry. And then that doesn't help them get any better. Or they may just say, you know what, I'm out of here. I just got to, it's supply and demand.
Yep.
And so they go somewhere else. They go to another state. And then we have cultivated that individual to a certain extent. Maybe they went to school here. Maybe they started working here. We've trained them to a part. And now we've lost it. And so we don't have that. We're not reaping the benefits of that person that got their education in Florida, started their career in Florida. Now they're going to go take advantage of the work in whatever other state. And we have to start as an industry, again, find a college student, cultivate them, educate them, bring them along. And then they can, and so
hope they stay.
And hope they stay. Right. I mean, and so that's the trickle down effect of not having that statewide program. It really is more of a marketing, and it ends up being a supply and demand issue.
Wow. You had a list of all the counties and places that are. What are they doing right? What are some of the positives that these counties are doing that other counties or other municipalities can take from it?
Well, they are showing initiative, and they are being assertive. A lot of I think, look, Florida is a wonderful place. Nobody's going to argue. If it wasn't that great, we wouldn't be here ourselves. But I do think there's a lot of complacency in the state, and I think there's a lot of arrogance in the state in terms of, well, we're Florida. We don't need to do any of that other stuff because we're Florida. And everybody wants to move here. And we have low taxes. And we have beaches. And we have theme parks. Yes, we have all of those things.
But you could also go to Puerto Rico.
But there are like the pushback that I'm fighting in my area up in Central Florida is, yes, but we also have ridiculous traffic. And we also have overpopulation. And so they're like, everything's not perfect, and that's okay. It's okay to say we love our state, but we still need to work on some things. the counties and the municipalities that are doing well right now, it's because they are assertive and they have said this is an industry that has high wage, high tech jobs, and that shows off our area, and those are good things. And so if it means we need to incentivize productions and projects to come to our location so we can get those high tech jobs and we can show off our area, let's do it. And to their credit, some of them, there's municipalities that are giving a $10,000 grant. That's it, $10,000. And they know that they're not going to get a feature film for it. They're not going to get a massive television series. They're going to get a small budget. But they know it's important to cultivate. It's low at $10,000. Now, there are other programs that are giving up to $800,000 or even more per project, assuming they check all the boxes and spend the money and hire the people. But there's a wide range, and the areas that are doing well have said, regardless of everything else going on, this is an industry that's important to our location, and we're going to support it. And there's a lot to be said for just saying, this is important, we support it. It doesn't always have to be financial. That's the biggest thing that I have been disappointed in with our state legislature is it's one thing if you don't want to give financial support to an industry or whatever, okay? If you just have that philosophical belief that incentives are not the way to go, we don't believe we should give financial incentives, we can respectfully disagree with that. That's fine. Yeah. But when legislators go out of their way to harm an industry that has been here for over a century, that's where I'm frustrated. If you don't want to support financially, okay. But there's no reason to actively try to do damage to Floridians, okay? There's the only people that get hurt when the legislature does things to damage us is us. They're not hurting Hollywood, Hollywood, California in this case. They're not hurting the woke Hollywood liberal elites. They're hurting Floridians because it makes it harder for you and me and everybody that works in this industry to pay their bills, which means it hurts our families and our kids, and we go home at night instead of, teaching our kids, helping them with their math and their language arts and their science in school. We're trying to figure out how are we going to pay payroll next week. And oh my God, I hope this client signs this contract tomorrow because I need to get the deposit in so we can get going, so we can continue, to get the next one and then the next one. The legislature has made it harder for Floridians that work in our industry to survive. And that's the part that has been most frustrating to me over the last 4 or 5 years.
It is terrible to see. I mean, even from just a personal level, I've seen countless amounts of people go from filmmakers working in the industry to working at FedEx or Postal Service or working at a restaurant. And I don't know, you can kind of see it in their eyes. Like they had this dream and this big aspirations, this goal to make this production company and make this film and sell it. And then you see where they're at now and it hurts, just as a friend to people and that sort of deal. Yeah.
I mean, you were asking about some of the positives of being the executive director. Those are probably the worst is when we have a member and, the time comes for me to send their renewal notice. And they respond and say, I've left Florida because I just couldn't do it anymore. Or I've what's the term they've used? I've reevaluated where I am in my career and I'm no longer in this industry. It's like, that's a gut punch. It's a gut punch. And not because of the finances. It's just hearing, you can hear the tone through their email that they they're just sad to have to put that on paper because that makes it real. And it's like, man, I just feel for those people. Yeah.
I just saw someone post gear on Facebook Marketplace just 2 days ago, and said that career's going in a different direction, excited for the change, but it means I'm selling a few things. And I'm like, I'm reading that and I'm like, is this a good change because you said you're excited? Because it did use the word excited in there. But also, is it just because you're tired of not getting work?
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know this person well enough to know if they're, going from a a below the line labor position to an above the line labor position. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it really made me wonder, like, are you changing careers? Are you leaving the state? And I don't know, something about it. I just was like, I have a bad feeling that it's exactly what you're saying is that. And it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. I mean, I've seen colleagues and peers and friends leave the state over the years, and it's so we've lost some good ones to other states.
Yeah.
I've witnessed them leave. Yeah. Hop in the U-Haul and say, hey, my man, I loved working with you all these years. Bye.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I was gonna say I don't want to keep it on this negative note here.
We got to finish.
Yeah, find a segue there.
There's no segue to this. I really want to let people know that we have you as the executive director and how Film Florida is helping, but I want people to know a little bit more about you and your thought leadership, your work before Film Florida. I saw something along the lines of you had worked at Disney for director of operations along those lines, and you were awarded the Partners in Excellence Award at Disney.
Yeah.
So clearly you're someone who excels, who cares, who puts forth their best effort. What was one of the, in your words, your greatest achievement that's led up into Film Florida? And what was your kind of like career highlights?
Yeah.
Because you have...
You make it sound like I'm so old. So the one thing that I think I have... Okay, when people ask me for advice, like, and that actually makes me feel old because I remember asking people for advice. And so now they're asking me for advice on their career.
Our young 19-year-old interns ask me for advice. I'm like, I'm not that far from you, man.
Yeah.
Like this.
So there's two things that I try and live by. Actually, three. Number one is I am the best example of be at the right place at the right time and then don't screw it up. Because so we'll put a pin in that. Part of my story is born and raised in the Chicago area, went to Purdue University. Why, I have no idea, because I wasn't an engineer or a pharmacy major. Wanted to write for Sports Illustrated. My first journalism class, I hated my teacher so much, she turned me off from the entire idea of that. And I remember sitting in my dorm, again, aging myself. That was back when you literally had a catalog, a book to flip through majors. And I couldn't stay in college more than 4 years. I just couldn't afford to do it. So I knew I had to stay within kind of the College of Liberal Arts and just kept flipping and flipping and flipping. Saw video production. Okay, that seems kind of fun. Maybe I'll give that a try. So went that route. It wasn't until my senior year that I actually realized I hate video production. I hate production, but I love post-production. I love editing. To this day, I still love editing. I'm not very good at it anymore because I don't do it enough, but I love piecing the puzzle together.
Wow.
So got out, graduated, got a job as a post-production assistant in the Chicago area. Year and a half after, I needed a change of scenery for a variety of reasons. And just at that time, again, no real internet, sent paper resumes and cover letters to anyone I could find that, doing searches on the early days of Netscape and AOL and all that.
Yes.
Got to a division of the Walt Disney Company called Disney Ideas. And my resume and my cover letter got on the right person's desk right as they were actually looking to fill a position. And so right place, right time, they invited me down, had an interview. and offered me a job. And I did all of that without my dad, who I was living with at the time, really knowing that I was looking to move. And so he picked me up from the airport, thought I had gone down to Orlando to visit a friend, picked me up at the airport, and I, driving home from the airport, I said, Dad, I think I'm moving to Florida, and just about ran off the road. and at that time, I think he kind of was like, okay, he's 23, he'll go down there, he'll explore, but he'll be back. And I never did come back. And my dad, I think till the day he passed away, I still think he was waiting and hoping for me to come home, because I don't think he thought it would last. But I was at the right place at the right time. They needed somebody. They hired me. It was a way to get down to Florida. I did that. A couple of years into that, I had been working for the Walt Disney Company, and our owner at the time, our vice president, decided to buy the division from Disney and go independent. And again, the timing was right for him to do that. And so I was like third on the totem pole in the operation side of it. But the people ahead of me were Disney lifers, and they wanted to stay with Disney. And they were like, screw this. I'm not leaving my Disney position to go to this startup that I have no idea what's going to happen. So like people literally were sitting around the table saying, well, he left and she left. So
you're the
John, I guess you're the operations guy. So from an operations standpoint, it was my job to transition from the Walt Disney Company to a startup independent.
Wow.
And the part of the reason why that worked out, though, I actually skipped over a step, was shortly after I got to Disney, we were approaching the whole Y2K thing. And believe it or not, our computer system that did all of our stuff within Disney was not Y2K compatible. Oh. So we had to get a whole new computer system, and they showed up for the kind of the rollout, because again, at that time, executives across the street made the decision and said, here, this is going to be your new software, not having any idea of what we actually did or how we did it. And they walked over and said, here's your new system, gave us a stack of like 12 or 15 floppy disks that had the actual program that you would load into a computer, and said, who wants to learn it? And nobody was interested. And so I said, all right, I'll do it. And so I loaded it in and learned it. And so I literally learned how the business was run from the ground up, because I had to enter it in the whole new system and load it in and figure out how to schedule and how to bill and how to put all the tape library in and all of these things, not knowing that a year and a half later, we were going to transition to our own business. And so again, kind of right place at the right time, and then took advantage of it. And then my role within Film Florida was needed to transition. It was time. I had worked for the company for 18 years, and Film Florida was looking for somebody to be the executive director. So I was at the right place at the right time. All of those, I took advantage of the opportunity and didn't screw it up. And so that's
the big factor.
That's a big, like that is. So that's,
but you have to get your opportunity, and you
have to get the opportunity, which means you have to be around. You can't, you're not going to get the opportunity by gaming and sitting on your couch all day, or flipping through your phone all day,
or having one foot out the door,
and always looking for the bigger, better, greener pasture. It's
not always greener on the other side.
It definitely is not. It definitely is
man,
not.
That's a whole different topic.
So be at the right place at the right time, and then don't screw it up. The other one is a Kobe Bryant thing that I thought was awesome. It doesn't take any skill to give effort. And that is something that I try and instill in my kids. It's like, I don't care if you screw up, but don't be lazy. Just don't be lazy. And it's a struggle. And again, old guy on the porch right now. It is a struggle with young kids that just seem lazy right now. And I don't know if we seemed lazy when we were that age. I don't really know.
I've had this conversation with my parents, and they've told me, like, you had a few lazy years, but I think that's just, we realize what hard work gets you, but I think every kid just will have a lazy phase in some capacity. Yeah. We just realize it because we're more self-aware now, and we understand what needs to happen. My kids are younger than yours, and even then I'm trying to instill in them, like, we're going to try hard. Yeah. Period.
Yeah.
Like we are. I have jokingly said a few times, I think on this podcast even, but even to like coworkers and our team and other freelancers, like my son is terrible at soccer. He's not good.
Okay.
Like there's no soccer future.
Wow, he's going to hear this one day.
Yeah, one day. And he's going to say, oh, that's why I don't play soccer. Yeah, there's a reason. He's still doing it now. He loves it. Has a great time. He runs around and he gives effort. But he's not good.
Yeah.
But he's out there running and he's out there trying.
He's learning the effort part.
Yes.
So he eventually will find something he's good at.
Exactly.
And when you put the two together, then you actually
And that's what my wife and I
Yes.
are talking about.
Yes.
Is like, we actually think that after this season, we're going to try a different sport and see if something connects.
Yeah.
But it's not soccer, but he is trying and
Yeah.
he's running and he's kicking and he's the coach will say something and he's, okay, yeah. And he's looking and I'm like, hey, I dig it. Can he really kick that ball straight or nah, he's not really getting that, but the effort part is there. And that there's a lot to be said there.
And then the last thing that I do, and I think this is kind of the epitome of my efforts legislatively, is because there are plenty of times when I just want to quit and be done with it, is something, and the phrasing I'm sure is wrong, but don't look at it as you need to move boulders. You just need to move one rock at a time, one little rock. Don't look at it and say, oh my God, that's just an enormous mountain. How are we going to move that? Look at it as, I'm going to move this rock. And then when I'm done with that one, I'll move the next rock. And maybe you can get 5 friends that will move a rock with you. And maybe those 5 friends can find 5 other friends and move one rock with you each at a time. And the next thing you know, you may have moved the mountain without even really thinking about it. But don't look at it as, I got to move a mountain. Just look at it as, I got to move one little rock at a time. And that's what I try to keep telling myself with some of the more challenging things that we have going on with our industry.
I have to tell myself that every day. I use a Kanban board, and my backlog is crazy. But I'm like, just keep pulling one out.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep going. And then you see it shorten up.
Yeah.
We're nearing the end of our time here. Where could you point people to what's the right direction? If you had to point someone where to go, what to do with their business or how they can get in touch with Film Florida, what is the kind of overall message that you want to put out there on how you can help them?
I mean, the best way, look, I tell people all the time, I encourage them to join Film Florida, not because it's my job, because I genuinely do believe it's good for business. I think it's working smarter, not harder. Yes, it's a cliche, but it actually is what we try to do within the organization, as opposed to companies or individuals just feeling like they're on an island and I don't know what to do. I may not know the answers to a lot of questions. I know I don't know the answers to a lot of questions, but I know a lot of people. And if somebody reaches out to me and needs something and wants something, I can, in a lot of cases, I can point them in the right direction. And that's the most important thing that we try and provide people within the organization. In terms of how to find us in general, the easiest thing is go to our website, which is filmflorida.org. There's an email address on there and a phone number. They both end up to me. So I get those. Make sure you're following any of our social media pages. We're on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads. We have our podcast, which is the Film Florida Podcast, on all the major podcast outlets. We do a monthly professional development series on Zoom. It's called Film Florida Friday, where we pick a topic and we have panelists and we ask them questions about that subject. And then it's a regular Zoom session. So the last half of the event, we open it up to the audience just to ask their own questions. I know everybody's kind of zoomed out on things, but so it's a double-edged sword. If we're going to do something like this, like a panel discussion in Pinellas County, well, that nixes 80% of the state from participating. But hey, the 30 people here that might show up, they get a nice in-person thing. So we do them on Zoom, and we literally do have people from Pensacola to Key West that are able to participate and do participate. And so, yeah, nobody's going to argue that face-to-face, isn't going to be better and more effective, but we try and be as inclusive as we can. And so we do that once a month. So there's a lot of different things that we do for our members specifically. Me on the soapbox, it is aggravating when we get people that are looking for, can you connect me with this person? Can you help me find this? Can you, show me how to do this? Can I ask you questions about that? And aren't willing to join the organization, because that's the mentality that's going to eventually do damage to the industry, because they're just assuming somebody else will take care of that. I don't need to join Film Florida because there are other people to do that. Well, if we're always waiting for somebody else and the other people, eventually nobody's going to do it. Whether it's Film Florida, whether it's in the industry, whether it's at your job, if you're always waiting for somebody else to handle it, eventually it's not going to get handled. So,
well, I co-sign it. Sign up, people.
There you go.
Join.
John, appreciate your coming over and having a face-to-face conversation with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I'll be seeing you plenty the next 2 days.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
That was good.
All right.